Have you ever had a former team member who, after they leave, starts, well, stirring up trouble? It's a really tricky situation a lot of leaders face, but nobody really talks about it. So in this explainer, we're going to break down a framework to help you understand what's really happening and give you some clear steps on how to handle it.
This kind of thing almost never starts with some big, loud confrontation. Nope. It usually begins with a whisper. A series of conversations that seem totally innocent, targeting your people when you're not around.
It often kicks off with a simple question like this. On the surface, it sounds like they care, right? But coming from someone who left on bad terms, it's totally a loaded question. They're not just asking how you are. They're really fishing for what's wrong, just trying to find an opening for some negativity.
And then you get this one, which is just packed with assumptions. The subtext here is pretty obvious. Things were a mess when I was there. I bet they still haven't fixed all the problems. It immediately puts a dark cloud over everything you're trying to do now.
And here it is, the final hook. This line is a classic. It sets them up as the one with all the secret, inside information, the real story. Suddenly, it creates this us versus them vibe and makes it seem like current leadership is hiding something. So as the leader, you're stuck in this really tough spot. You start hearing about these little chats, and you can't help but wonder, am I just being paranoid here? Or is something genuinely toxic brewing right under my nose, stealing my team one conversation at a time? To figure that out, we've got to look past these little comments and really diagnose the root of the problem. Because believe me, these whispers aren't random. They're actually symptoms of a much, much deeper issue. So here's what's actually going on. You've got a former leader who's holding on to some unresolved hurt. They feel like they were wronged, and they need to be proven right. So whether they realize it or not, they start trying to build this little splinter group, literally pulling your people between two different voices. The source material actually points to this ancient quote to frame the problem, and the key phrase here is to draw away disciples after them. See, this isn't about healthy feedback or wanting the team to be better. This is all about shifting loyalty away from the organization and its mission and putting it squarely onto one person. And that leads us to this really crucial idea, the second center of loyalty. This is where things get truly dangerous. It creates this competing story inside your team. It completely undermines unity, and it basically forces people to choose a side. Okay, so how do you spot these behaviors in the wild? Well, the source gives us a fantastic framework by looking at two very different case studies. Think of them as two ancient playbooks for how you can use influence, one to build people up and the other to tear things down. And here's the contrast, side by side. On one hand, you have the Absalom playbook. This person listens to complaints, but only to find fault. They use subtle digs at leadership to make themselves look good and build loyalty to their own personality. On the other hand, you've got the Timothy playbook. This person also cares, but their goal is to strengthen hearts, to serve the leadership, and to point loyalty back to the whole team and its mission. One divides, the other unites. All right, so we've diagnosed the problem, and we've got a framework to understand it. The big question is, what do you actually do about it? Let's get practical. The source lays out a really clear 4-step action plan to help you respond with wisdom and confidence. But wait, before you jump into action, you've got to ask yourself a few honest questions. First, are your team members more joyful or more suspicious after these conversations? Second, are they being drawn closer to the mission or are they getting pulled into one person's bitterness? And finally, just check in with yourself. Do you feel lighter or heavier after you hear about it? The answers are going to tell you everything you need to know. So here's the 4-step plan. Number 1, and this is crucial, guard your own heart first. Make sure you're not operating out of bitterness. 2, talk clearly with your team about unity and focus. 3, you have to set firm, clear boundaries with that former leader. And finally, number 4, brief your own leaders on the situation, not to gossip, but to give them the facts. Now, taking those steps is absolutely essential. But to really, truly solve this, you also have to win the internal battle. It's all about forging a new mindset for yourself, adopting a few internal scripts that empower you to lead with real clarity and confidence. Here's the first part of that new mindset. You've got to see your role differently. You're not just a manager, you're a guardian. And your loyalty isn't just a passive feeling, it's an active verb. A huge part of that is protecting your team from voices that are trying to recruit them into bitterness. This next one is so important. Remember, politeness is not permission. You can be kind and respectful, absolutely, but that does not mean you have to allow someone to use your team as their personal sounding board, as their, quote, spiritual rebound for all their negativity.
And finally, this is about protecting yourself. You simply cannot lead well if you're constantly letting in conversations that drain your energy and steal your focus. Setting this boundary for yourself isn't selfish. It's essential for your own well-being and for the health of the entire team you're trying to lead.
So, in the end, it really all comes down to this powerful idea. As a leader, your job is to tell the difference. Not all conversations that sound caring are actually helpful. So, the question you're left with is, which kind of conversations are you allowing to have influence over your team? Because that answer will shape everything.